Rob Hanley, welcome back to the show. Is this like the fourth or 10th time that you've been on?
Don't know anymore, man. Maybe it's the fourth, 10th, 20th. Who knows? It's always fun, though.
Yeah, but this is going to be different because we're going to turn the tables and Rob is going to grill me and he's going to interrogate me like the Interpol agent that he possibly is. And he's going to just extract amazing business nuggets for everybody listening. Some personal life details that only a good friend like Rob knows about me. And we're really going to open the kimono, as people say, and really give some great value in this. And so,
Yeah.
Rob, where are you dialing in from on the call-in show with Craig?
Yeah, the call-in show with Craig. Hey, long-time listener, first-time caller, as they like to say. I'm coming to you today from the Silver Coast of Portugal.
Silver Coast, is that because everybody's old there?
I mean, look, it's probably because of the gray in my beard at this point rather than everybody else. But hey, it's beautiful. What can I tell you? It's a beautiful place. The weather's great. The people are friendly, and the food is excellent.
Absolutely. And so, we've known each other, and you've with you living in like many different countries, from Thailand, you're from Australia, you live in Portugal, you spent some time in America. Was there anywhere else that you were living as long as I've known you?
Yeah, man. So Vietnam, I spent some time in Colombia, Germany, a couple of different countries. The list goes on, but yeah, bounced around a few of them. And then over that time, it's really where you and I built that friendship, primarily over email in the first place.
Yeah, the first place, and then you made the big leap. You came to the Toys for Tots event, where we had so many amazing entrepreneurs. We learned so many lessons there, and you came to our Toys for Tots events in Denver for many years, and that meant a lot to me. And then you came to one of my workshops in London, England, and we traveled around. We've been to Croatia, we've been to Albania. Yes, Rob and I have been to Albania together. Yeah, for lunch. Montenegro, I really enjoyed. We had some really great hikes there and a great boat ride in Kotor, where you were captaining the boat. So, man, Rob and I have been around the world, and Rob has been around the world. Rob talks to people all over the world. If you haven't already listened to him and I talk about the inflation stuff from 2022, go back and listen to that one. I'm sure we'll do an updated one very soon. But Rob, I'm happy to get rocking and rolling here so that people can get a ton of secrets about me. To add to their life.
That's the whole point, right? Like, I think I'm pretty uniquely positioned because, we've known each other for over a decade. We've talked a lot about business stuff, personal stuff. We've exchanged a bunch of emails. And, my experience as an outsider, so to speak, in your life, it's really about bringing a richer texture to people who get to say, oh, okay, like Craig says, magic time. Hey, where's that come from? Why does that matter? Because at the end of the day, everyone who's listening to you, you can give them great advice. But if they don't connect with it, if they don't know where it comes from, hey, maybe it's going to be a little harder for them to buy into. Maybe it's going to be a little harder for them to see how it fits their own life. But also, there's always the excuses, right? You're a dad now. You've, prior to this, always had people say, oh, well, that's fine for Craig Ballantyne. He hasn't got kids, but you have kids now. So we're going to start diving into this stuff. And I mean, as I said before, we've known each other for a long time, and I'm a studious reader. I know all the history about the business coaches you hired and all this stuff. So I think we'll be able to pull out things for people who haven't known you for as long as I have. They'll go, got it. This is why Craig's the man. So, why don't we start off with something really easy, just to get it going? Why don't we start off with just the very beginning? What do you think is the most rewarding business deal that you have made to this day?
2012, I was in Thailand, so my only visit to Thailand, and sitting around a pool in Pattaya of all places. So I've only been to Bangkok and Pattaya. I haven't been to some of the fun places, but I'm there with two of our mentors, Matt Smith and Simon Black, aka James Hickman. And for some reason, they allowed me to buy into Sovereign, man, which is now Sovereign Research and Advisory and stuff like that. So that was 2012. They allowed me to buy in. I was going to do some stuff with their fourth pillar program. And a year later, they bought me out at double what I gave them, which I don't understand why they did it, but they did it. And so anyways, it didn't, it's just nice being a part of that group because they're, my mentors, and then they, saw the value in me being part of the group. And so even though it didn't last very long, and I don't think I really helped them out that much, but that was one that I'm always going to, really appreciate. It wasn't the one that made me the most absolute money, but the return was pretty good considering the amount of time that I was in there.
Yeah. And also, I think you touched on something there, how rewarding it is to be involved in being part of that group. And that brings to me, an interesting question is, You and Matt have done a lot of business together in a couple of different businesses now, a couple of different companies, industries, markets. But it's so different in the approaches you guys have. So for you, turbulence training was your first big venture. You were early online in the marketing space and fitness space, quickly became a major player. But on the flip side, Matt, where you were hiring people like Tom Benu to coach you, Matt moved to the other side of the country, I think it was. He talks about walking in knee-deep snow to work for this guy in direct response. Whereas you didn't work under anyone. You were just like, hey, you know what, that's a good idea. I'm going to go do that. How do you think that shaped your approach to business and also coaching business owners, which is a huge part of what you do these days?
Well, okay. So I think I definitely walked to some of my mentors in knee deep snow because I was a personal trainer to literally Canada's richest people. So I have trained David Thompson, who is Canada's richest man. I have actually personal trained that guy. And I did walk through very, very cold conditions to get from the subway stop to the gym in downtown Toronto in January and February. So I have done that. Now, it's
not a prerequisite though. That's not a prerequisite to success. You don't have to walk through snow.
Yeah. Well, back in, we walked through knee deeps, we walked through waist deep snow to get to school too. So the way that I approach, and I was just cheap when I was a kid, a kid in business. And so I would say that most of my early mentors, because I made a bunch of money before I hired Tom in 2006, and I could have hired Tom in 2003, but I was too cheap. And so I was stupid. And from 2000 to 2006, I bought a couple of manuals at $97. I got, I had a CD course and, a live teleseminar course from a friend named Ryan Lee, who is really one of my first mentors. I mean, Ryan Lee and I met on the internet in 1998.
Damn.
1998. There's a lot of people listening to this that were never born, right?
Yeah.
And he had this website called Complete Conditioning. And, so he was like really, 8 years before I even hired Tom. And, so I spent in 2001, I think I spent $200 on a teleseminar series with Ryan. And, it was very helpful, but, I was picking stuff up through Yannick Silver's emails and a bunch of other internet guy emails. And Dan Kennedy, I don't think I really started getting into until about 2005. I jumped on Early to Rise probably in 2003. Yeah. So Mark Ford was my mentor through the Early to Rise newsletters. And I started writing for them in 2005, just some health tips and stuff like that. And I also was working with the Men's Health magazine guys. And so I was kind of patchworking a lot of stuff. And that was just my nature. I'm still have a lot of social anxiety, meeting new people and going into groups. So if I could learn and read something, I would take that approach to the learning every day that I possibly could, as opposed to, Matt going and working for a new boss every couple of years or something. That just sounds, it sounds difficult in many ways, but, once I found something, I try not to leave it.
It's interesting in that, as you said, jump between all these different mentors and has had a lot of different businesses. And the truth is, a lot of people don't know about Matt, right? Matt's given me some of the greatest advice ever, and a lot of people who are in the know him. But you, on the flip side, a lot of people know you. And I guess because you've walked, as you said, the path of, I'm going to be cheap. I'm not going to hire a coach. I'm going to DIY everything. But then when you've hired people, you've seen how much faster that is because they just shortcut you, right? What do you reckon it is then that stops people, including yourself, hiring? Is it just a cheapness thing? Is it people don't get it?
I think that people are too busy. So they think that, my goodness, I wouldn't even be able to make time for these calls. And, we kind of live this double-edged sword in our business where we help people become unbusy, but to get them on their first call, sometimes, Daniel just had a client, our head coach, Daniel had a client, took him 4 weeks to get a person on a call. They canceled so many calls last minute because they had all these emergencies. So people, they're cheap with their time, I guess you could say. It's they know they have the money to do it. And, it's much more popular now to hire a coach than it was, 2006 and way back then. So it's, it's in people's minds. They know they should do it. They're like, where on earth am I going to, quote unquote, find time to get on a call, let alone do all this stuff that this person is going to tell me to do. And they also, a lot of people who do have the money objection, they have this hilarious, it doesn't make sense, catch-22 money objection, which is, I can't afford it right now, so I'm going to go and make a bunch of money and then I'll come back to you. And it's like, well, you can't make money right now, so how can you possibly think that you're going to be able to make money going forward to afford this? Like, how does that make any sense in your mind? So, people are still, they're skeptical. If they've never had a coach, a lot of people have been burned by coaches. So, and here's the thing is that I know people that claim they have been burned by coaches who I know are good coaches. And so obviously there's always a couple sides to every story. And, maybe they had a bad experience with somebody in the organization, or maybe they came in with this expectation and the coach, maybe the salesperson screwed up and overpromised and then the team couldn't deliver. Or maybe it was just, you and I can look at the same picture and interpret different things, and it could have been a misinterpretation of what we're going to get out of this. So a lot of people have been burned by coaches or don't know what coaching is. And then that is, kind of conveyed in the price, or also they don't have the time. So there's a lot of reasons that people still don't get the help that they need. Very much like someone who's overweight still doesn't get the help that they need. They think that, they don't have time. They've been burned in the past and nothing's worked. And it's going to take too much effort. And also it's just so intimidating and insurmountable. All the, I'm so far gone, or there's so much to learn. I can't even imagine where to start. So there's a lot of, humans are really, really great at making objections to getting started with something new when they just aren't 100% sure that it's going to work.
I think it's something that you're uniquely positioned to look at. And what you're talking about with people, there's that resistance because they don't know. And it's scary and it's confronting. Sometimes you have to risk looking like an idiot, right? Like, oh, I'm an idiot. And then there's as well the people that you ironically want to learn the most from, you are most concerned about looking good in front of. So when you have someone who works with you, like, oh my God, Craig's amazing. Oh, I can't look like an idiot in front of Craig. But the irony is that you're probably the person who's going to judge him the least. Like, you're not going to jump on a call with someone and say, oh, you're an idiot. What are you doing? You're stupid. Unless they've, done the mistake a lot of times. But I mean, you actually, and I don't know if people really get how much you care, not just about your clients on a business sense, but you care about them on a personal sense. Back when I got divorced in, what was that, 2018, prior to the divorce, you and I were emailing about that. We talked about that at length. You've done this for other people. And I think there's this gap, and you correct me if I'm wrong. When people go to engage you or hire you, they start off thinking, oh, I've got a very specific problem, but they kind of pussyfoot around getting involved with you. But then all of a sudden, there's this big breakthrough they can have. But it just requires what a friend of mine, Steve Cam, calls 3 seconds of confidence. You just got to be confident for 3 seconds. Say yes. Start the call. And once the momentum is moving, things change. So it's more of a side note, I guess, an observation of watching people. But I know people who have hired you time and time again. Right? I was talking to Isabel Price the other day. And she was like, yep, I've got Craig on and he's helping me stay on the right track. And that's something that's really interesting is you talk about coaches who have great reputations, but you have a good one yourself. Why is it, do you reckon, people like Isabel come back to you again? What is it that makes you different versus other coaches who do a one and done 8-week program?
Yeah, so certainly there's a constant growth in myself that people see, and remind me to come back to this point where I'm leaving off right now. But when you spoke of feeling like an idiot, I was just on another show yesterday, and I was talking about how in the last year I've started 3 things that have made me feel like an idiot exponentially. Like, I haven't felt this dumb since probably being in some of the exercise physiology labs that I was had to do, like, because I have difficulty with mechanical things. Like, so when we were trying to figure out like the VO2 max of somebody, like I couldn't hook the machines up and stuff. And so I'm just not naturally good at that. So I felt really dumb back then. But in the last year, I have taken up Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which requires mechanical dexterity. So I'm just like, yesterday I was in the room with 3 other guys and I just felt like such a tool. And then obviously taking up Spanish, which I'm a little bit better at, and then becoming a father for the first time. So those are 3 things. So like I'm back in university, like life university, but the one that gives me the greatest anxiety and the one that gives me the greatest embarrassment is the jiu-jitsu. And because like, I can memorize which arm to grab, but it doesn't naturally come to me to grab the arm and push the person in a particular direction because you've taken their base of support out of that side. And so I just like, I have to think a lot. And, my instructor, who's very kind and who I don't mind looking like an idiot in front of, fortunately, he's actually a Belgian. He used to be, he's 25 years in the Belgian police force. He was a security guard at the EU headquarters, 4th degree jiu-jitsu black belt, karate black belt in like 1992. It's one of the first guys to get a black belt in jiu-jitsu in Belgium. He's got world championships. He's really, really great and a really, really nice guy. But he just looks at me and, man, you just like think things through so much. But now that I'm starting to get the hang of it, it's a little bit better. But I was like, I remember there was a couple of lessons where I was like, I'm like a 6-year-old boy who's about to start crying, and I'm going to run out of the room and throw my belt down and say I'm never coming back.
Yeah. It's just that challenging for you, that overwhelming almost.
Yeah, and so, but as I said yesterday, it's like I am learning to embrace being an idiot, because if you don't embrace being an idiot, you can never learn anything new. Because whether you're learning handgun safety, whether you're learning CPR and first aid, whether you're, these are a couple of things I'm also thinking about taking up soon too, which is a nice combination. So when I shoot myself in the hand, I will be able to tape myself up.
Take care of yourself. Yeah. Very important.
But just anything that you can think of, cooking, going to the gym, you're going to feel like an idiot. I remember back when I was running turbulence training, I made a video for beginners of here's what it's like to walk into a gym. You're going to walk in, there's going to be a front desk. Then there's going to be a locker room. Because even when I go to a new gym, I'm like, well, man, I don't know where anything is. And imagine if you're 200 pounds overweight, you can't last on a treadmill for 7 minutes, and you're very self-conscious and you're very shy. Like, going to a gym, it's not about the fact that you won't do the work. It's about the fact that you're going to feel like an idiot for the next 9 months figuring the place out. And so if we circle all the way back to the, the business side of things, is people are going to feel like that. Like, when I remember, like, the guy who writes our emails now, Tim, he writes in my voice, and Mark Ford always sends me these nice messages saying, hey, great email today. I'm like, I'll pass that on to Tim, who's been writing our emails for the last 2 years. And Tim was a general manager for sales at a car dealership in Winnipeg when he came to my first seminar. And it was 8 months of coaching before I mentioned copywriting. And he was like, I had never heard of the term copywriting before. And then he just went down this rabbit hole of studying. And now he's a world-class email copywriter, making 4 times as much, working half the time from his home. And it's really amazing. But I talk about sales, I talk about copywriting, I talk about speaking, I talk about leadership. And if people have never dipped their toe in any of those waters, man, like when you dip your toe in, you get the fire hose, and it's very intimidating. And that's life. So back to Isabel. And so Isabel is like a super fan. So she may not be the best person to tell the stories about, because she's a super fan, because, she's essentially a female version of me, very organized, very structured, all that sort of stuff. And she's been a client since 2009, when she had no money to her name, and her fiance at the time, who's her husband now, put DVDs. No, actually, she borrowed the DVDs from a friend, but she put the coaching on his credit card. But that was, that's how long I've been helping people out, since the DVD days. And so she said to me one time, can you just move into my house? So I can always ask, always say, what would Craig do? And so I live a life of extremes, not so that other people will live a life of extremes, but so that, you're not going to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, but you're going to get up 5 minutes earlier. So by me living a life of extreme, just like Wim Hof lives a life of extreme, like David Goggins lives a life of extreme, I don't think David Goggins expects anybody to be like David Goggins. And I don't think Wim Hof expects anybody to be like Wim Hof. But if we move you towards being closer to Wim Hof and David Goggins and Craig Ballantyne, then further away, we believe that your life will be better. So therefore, it's like, hey, we'll set our position over here.
Yeah. So
Take a couple steps our way.
Yeah.
So I think people see me doing that.
Oh,
people see me doing that, and they see me doing that. They see me putting out content on a regular basis, see me adding value, see me sharing stories about people, see me personally improving. See like, man, this guy's been around a long time, and there's a lot of other people that haven't been around a long time or that disappeared. So, there becomes some more trust in it. But that's one thing that people have to have, is they have to have trust in the expert to make the move, and finally do something. Because I had been, back to me and my story, like I've been thinking about jujitsu for a long time. The social anxiety thing has like always been one of the reasons. Like, I do not want to go into a room of strangers. I'm finally getting comfortable with a couple of the guys in the class, but just, I don't mind looking like an idiot. Looking like an idiot in jujitsu is painful, but it's 100 times more painful for me to walk into a room of people and do small talk. I just hate it. And so that stopped me for a long time. And then fortunately we met this guy, lives like 6 houses down. And, we just got lucky that Michelle had talked to his wife about a housekeeper or something. And then Michelle said, hey, this guy does training. You should check him out. And so I lucked into it. And this guy is just really good in many ways.
There's a lot to be said for serendipity. And something that's very serendipitous is you were talking about being uncomfortable. And that's a point of resistance for a lot of people, right? And I don't want to talk about so much about the comfort zone, but there's a science researcher, a woman named Ashley Merriman. She wrote a book called Top Dog. It's one of my favorite books of all time. And she and I are in contact over email. She just started up this thing called the Sherwood Report, or restarted it. It's a regular publication. And in this publication, she talked about that feeling uncomfortable is a sign you are making progress. And it's really counterintuitive. But two things kind of line up is the first, that, of course, you're going to feel uncomfortable as you do something new. That's kind of obvious when you hear it. But the second thing is the discomfort always comes before the whoosh, as you call it. Like those lessons where you felt like running out of the room crying like a 6-year-old boy and throwing the belt on the ground, I am almost willing to bet that once your ego had been fractured, the next couple of lessons after that, you probably saw huge gains. You probably hit the point of the pressure cooker and then went, bam. Was that true?
Más o menos, más o menos, as they say here in Mexico. So more or less. Yeah. And the biggest breakthrough that I had was I swept the guy. And so when you're in the guard position, when you're on your back, my instructor is big on posture. So if you have the right posture, it's very difficult for somebody to sweep you because you're upright, your center of gravity is almost impossible. But the guy that I spar with the most, he's always giving me his posture. He's always giving me his body weight. And my instructor, Frank, is always so frustrated that I can't use that, because all it is you do what he calls a hipscape, which you pull your hip up, then you slide one of your feet inside the guy. And then when he gives you his weight, you pull him a little bit towards you. You use that foot as a hook to lift his hips up, and you just flip him over. And I finally did that. And that was like, your first sale on the internet. That's what it was. And it was like, and I was like a 6-year-old kid who spelled a couple of words right, taking it to his teacher. And I was like looking at him, and he goes, good, but you're supposed to follow him instead of like sitting there going like this. So, but he recognized it. And so it was like, good, and so, man, so
that's great.
Yes.
That's a big accomplishment.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that big of an accomplishment, but it is an accomplishment.
Man. It is an accomplishment. Beforehand. It's a relatively big,
Yeah. So, but there was a lot of discomfort before that. And yesterday there was, in our session, there was a lot of discomfort, but it's interesting. There's a guy who lives a few more houses down, who's from Colorado. And he's like, have you ever met Dan Long? You met him with Dan Long at one of the Toys for Tots. He's one of Joel Marion's friends.
Yeah.
Kill mode, right? High energy.
Of course.
High energy. Of course. So this guy is kill mode. Like he's got all these tattoos.
Yeah, kill mode down low.
He's 51 and he started jujitsu at like 49, and he's a blue belt, and he just like comes on really hard. And we watched him against our instructor, Frank, the black belt, and Frank toys with him. And it's just, it's unbelievable. It's like, you know, Frank could be like doing Three Stooges pokes in the eyes to the guy because he's just like on top of the guy, crushing him. And it's because the guy has no posture. But anyways, but even, you know, so there's levels upon levels upon levels and so on and so forth.
And I think this is good because you talk about the discomfort, you talk about the mismatching. And these are things that I think it was actually Mark Ford who once talked about. You can be a hard-nosed businessman, or you can care about people. I think it's in Ready, Fire, Aim. And caring about people always outperforms being a hard-nosed businessman. And it's this dirty little secret of business that, yeah, numbers matter. Numbers are everything, sure, in one perspective. But you got to have that human side. And we're talking about discomfort here. And one of your gifts is to push through discomfort. You know, Matt and I were sitting at the back of one of these Toys for Tots events just saying about how you'd picked up video. I think it was Instagram actually. And you just decided, I'm doing it. And the first X amount are going to suck and they're going to be uncomfortable. And then I'm going to push through it. So you've obviously been rewarded for, I guess you would say, sitting with the discomfort, right? Allowing it to wash over you as you moved forward. And then the discomfort washes away and only you remain. On the flip side, though, have you ever actually bailed on an opportunity because of that discomfort where it was just too much? And you said, oh, like I'm not going to invest in that, or I'm not going to pursue that opportunity because of that discomfort.
Yeah, I think I left strategic coach, you know, that group, just because the discomfort of being in a group full of complete strangers who I had nothing in common with. I was just like, I'm not going back. I didn't go back to any meeting. I went to one meeting and I didn't go back, and I made up a bunch of excuses. So whether or not that was super life-changing, I don't know. I'm trying to think if I skipped a speaking presentation. I remember actually I skipped doing the Dragon Door kettlebell certification. John Duquesne, who you know started that, invited me to come to attend an event for free, and I just at the last minute I just bailed on it and said, "Oh, I can't come." So because again, it was just like I don't want to meet all these people who are really into kettlebells. I'm not really into kettlebells, and the last thing I want to do is train kettlebells for 3 days and then talk about kettlebells for 3 days with strangers. You know, God bless people that do. And so, you know, there's been some stuff like that I have skipped out on for sure.
So question for you on that, right, is obviously, as I said before, you and I have very different businesses and business approaches. But what you just talked about there is knowing, yes, there was discomfort, but also being like, I don't care that much about kettlebells, man. Like,
Yeah.
Nassim Taleb calls it soul in the game. Like, you just didn't have soul in that game, man. Like, you would have been a horrible kettlebell instructor. You could have grinded it out, but that's not where you flourish. You know, where you flourish is connecting with all these other people. Do you find that when you're talking to your coaching clients, you ever have to pull them up and say, listen, man, like, this isn't you. This is not what you care about. You're chasing the wrong thing, some shiny object. Or do you find that a lot of clients come to that conclusion by working with you?
No, you have to tell them. You have to, you know, it's like a child who needs to be taught not to put their hand on a burning stove. Like you have to put the child in front of the burning stove and say, this is going to, you know, be really painful to you. And then, you know what, even if you show them 10 times, they'll probably do it. Right. And it's the same with
Why do you
people.
think that is?
What, the child thing or the analogy of the entrepreneur?
Well, no, like the adult. Yeah, my children do.
I don't know. I haven't figured them out yet.
Yeah.
It's because it's a good question. Why it's possibly because they know. So I'm thinking of a client that I'm working with right now, and he is insisting that he starts a lower ticket program. So, you know, he's a coach of online fitness coaches, you know, like, you know, half the internet is these days, and, you know, God bless him. And so he believes that it's too hard to sell this high ticket program. And so he's losing all this money by not having a lower ticket program. And even though I've told him no, and 2 other mentors have told him no, he's insisting that he must do this low ticket program. And I know that it's the same reason why, and I've done this before too. It's the same reason why I created like 150 turbulence training workout variations rather than sitting and grinding it out and figuring out Google ads and Facebook ads, because I told myself that it was too hard. It was impossible to use Google ads and Facebook ads. And therefore, if I just kept on making new programs, which was easy for me to do, that I would grow my business. And one of them would become an explosive runaway success. And so the shiny object is a distraction. It's a path of least resistance. The real way through is the hard way, right? And the way is the way through. And so he should focus entirely on the high ticket stuff and let the other thing go. But it seems like the easier money. It seems like, no, but this is going to work. And oh man, it's so hard. And there's going to be more rejection going the other way, even though that's the way to do it.
So the thing I was going to ask you is this idea of the hard way versus the easy way. There's probably a bit of nuance to it. Is sometimes the easy way, for example, is to grind on the wrong thing. And I mean grind. I mean, you can put in 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 120 hours a week on the wrong thing, because at least you can trick yourself into saying you're doing something. And in those situations, maybe the hard thing to do is actually accept that, hey, this just isn't the path for you. Like I've met people who've been entrepreneurs, tried to grind it out in publishing, struggled, moved into SaaS, for example. And yeah, market forces and all that. But I mean, they just found the right vehicle for them. And that was the hard thing, was giving up the fantasy. A quick example is in the inverse, actually, is I had a client who they wanted to scale a SaaS company. It wasn't very scalable. In theory it was, but in practice, nothing was clicking. But he had this just giant group of people who really wanted to learn how he had done what he had done. And all of a sudden, it was a technical skill. And he listened to me smartly by turning that into a course. He's now the biggest name in that industry, in the technical area. He has done an incredible job building relationships in that industry. It's a professional learning skill, right? It's design. But what's incredible is he was so caught up on the idea of, I want to be a tech startup. And he worked like a dog on that startup. But the hard thing to do is to let it go. Do you find that sometimes your clients think they're doing the hard thing by grinding, but actually letting it go harder?
Yeah. And, so I tried starting an app in 2021, I think it was that we started that. It might've been 2020. And I had a stop point in advance. Most people don't have a stop point in advance. And so I hit the stop point. I was like, man, okay, shutting this down, lost 150 grand. Yeah. Good lesson learned a few things from it. Mostly about how badly I screwed up the entire process. But most people don't have a stop point for it. And so they really truly believe that, they're just a few more months away from it working. It's irrational. Like they don't have why do you believe it's a few months away from it working? They don't have a rational answer for it, but they also have that sunk cost. I put so much effort into this. Well, okay, you willing to double your losses? And so they haven't really looked at their business as a game of poker. And I haven't read Annie Duke's books yet, but Annie Duke is a famous female professional poker player, and she talks about how success. The winners are the ones that know when to quit, and I like it because, for all of us who do say, "Hey, you can't quit," I'm a big believer you need to quit a lot of things, and you just need to understand what's really important and not quit on it. Now, you may need to quit on certain pathways to get there and try a new pathway, but you do need to quit a lot. And my friend Jason Capital is the master of quitting offers and businesses. Like he will quit something even if it's profitable, if it's not as profitable as he wants it to be. So there's no parameters when people go into new projects, and there's no stop points. And it's like, if you think like you need to play your business like a professional plays poker. They know how much they're willing to lose. They know how far they're willing to go. They know when to fold them and when to walk away. And most people don't. And they don't have, walking away is a new thing too. So what's it like to walk away and lose money? Most people have never done that before. And so therefore walking away and losing money is intimidating, embarrassing, and they don't know how to deal with it, because, it's like getting divorced. Like you don't, the first time you do it, hopefully most people only do it once. Like you don't.
Once is the plan.
Most people, there's a lot of people like my mother who never got, who stayed in a marriage that she shouldn't have stayed in, because the idea of getting divorced brought with it so much fear and so much unknown. And stopping a business brings, starting a business brings with it only the, optimism of unknown, and stopping a business brings with it the fear of the unknown. And it's, just damaging in many, many ways, because there's so much loss there. But if you look at it the right way, because I've helped a lot of people, like my friend Vince Domani, he had 3 businesses. I made him stop 2 of them. And, he's probably making like maybe $1.5 million from 3. And now he's making close to 10 from 1. And
Huge
I forced,
difference.
And, there was a bit of timing in there with the pandemic hitting, and he chose, I told him to choose the right one. And the other one never had hope in heck. And the other one was dying off. So it's like, this is the obvious one to choose, ride the trend. And he did. And now with one business, he's much more successful. But it was hard for him to shut those down, because there's some of your identity is wrapped up in it. There's money wrapped up in it. There's hopes and dreams wrapped up in it. A lot of it was comparison syndrome. He saw all these other guys making bank with a certain type of business. Therefore, I should. There was like, well, if I stop these, then no one will believe they should join the other business. And, just a lot of doubts in people's minds. So stopping things can be quite difficult, but it's one of the most powerful things you can do. Yeah.
It is. It's, you talked about divorce, which I obviously have experience with, loss in business, which I have experience with. So these things resonate. And I think there's something that we probably take for granted, right? We're overexposed to the ideas. You talked about, hey, I put 150 grand into this app, but I had a stop loss point. So you went in with a pre-made decision, as James Hickman would call them. It's a pre-made decision. I'm going to spend up to 150K. If X hasn't happened, I'm out. You talk about Jason Capital and Vince quitting these projects, and Matt Smith always jokingly refers to himself as a professional quitter. And then in terms of divorce, that's something that I've gone through, which you haven't, but it is that thing of how much of your identity is wrapped up, and you don't realize until after the fact that, oh, like, I'm alive. It's okay. Like, yeah, life changed, but it's fine. And when my ex and I split, I didn't really understand what was going on, to be honest. But as I've gotten further away from it, I think to myself, man, imagine spending the 2 of us wasting another 50 years on that trend. It obviously wasn't working out. Why would we waste 50 years on that? When you look at, you spent 150 grand on that, why would you spend another 150? And I think there's that counterfactual point, which really bears underscoring of go into something knowing how much you're prepared to risk, how much you're prepared to lose, never see again, whatever. What are you committing to? But then understand that you're not your business. Like, this is something, you've had multiple businesses now, right? You had Turbulence Training in its early days. You got into Early to Rise, you bought that. Once Early to Rise got started, you've changed how Early to Risers work 2, 3, 4 times probably by now. So it's actually a completely different business. And there's this myth that I'm sure your clients see of, this must be the one thing you do forever. This is, figure it out, and then that's it. Nothing changes.
Well, most people can't understand, how did you go from doing turbulence training to doing this? And I'm like, well, it's, I didn't get gender reassignment surgery. Like this, like you don't
very
have,
simple transition for you.
Yeah, you're not locked in. Like, you don't, if you're a plumber now, you don't actually have to be a plumber forever. Like, nothing wrong with plumber. I'm just saying, like, that's something everybody can understand. Like, you're going to be here for 80 to 120 years. you probably will do a bunch of things. I remember when I was a kid and they said most people have an average of like 5 careers over the course of a lifetime. And I was like, I'm just going to have one. And of course I haven't, but I thought that. I don't know why I thought I was so hooked on that, but the idea of change is difficult for people, but and the reason why people fear change is because of the unknowns. Because if you say, hey, you just won the lottery of $1 million, most people wouldn't fear the change, but they, because they have the optimism, the unknown optimism ahead. But if it's, your career is going to be affected by AI, your career is going to be affected by immigration, your career is going to be affected by, these upcoming changes. It terrifies people because I think one of the worst things that you can do to somebody is to take something away from them. And because that is a road to bitterness and frustration. Like, there's a lot of Americans who had a great standard of living, and many circumstances, going back over the last 30 years have taken those jobs away, the high paying jobs away, and removed them. And, to have something and have it taken away is worse than never having the thing in the first place. Yeah. So that's what people really struggle with.
This brings up a really good point, though, right? So we talked about managing risk in your business, and I guess there's managing risk in your life as well, right? Because really, businesses, it sits under life. You have a life, and part of that life is business, part of that's family, part of that's health, all these different things. But you've moved to a new country, and that's been part of how you've managed risk in your life. What was it that was the point where you said, you know what, this is where the optimism is? I'm going to Mexico. Why was it Mexico that had the optimism for you versus, say, Uruguay, where matters?
Yeah. So, different life situations. So a friend of ours, James, who I talked about before, had moved the year before to Mexico and had his child here. And by doing so, his child was granted Mexican citizenship in addition to the other citizenships that were passed down from the parents. So if there was a couple of places that allow you to do that, Brazil being one of them, which was too far from Canada. And, no offense to my Portuguese friends like you, I didn't want to learn Portuguese. It's not as widely spoken. So coming down here, I think Costa Rica was another one where the child would get the passport, but the parents would not get it. And again, it was also much further. We were very familiar with Mexico. Our friend James had been here, so we moved to the same city. We tried the same hospital. Just took the path that somebody else had already taken. Why reinvent any wheels? And so we came here, and there's a lot of Americans here, and Cancun is basically Fort Lauderdale light. So it's not there's some transition around the language, but aside from that, it's and the weather being the biggest one, it's generally similar to what we lived in at home. So there wasn't a whole lot of newness to it, scary newness. And, we were also coming to a place where our money would go further. So that was like another pro. And the weather is
the big pro.
Generally pretty good here. It gets a little humid in the summer, but even I'm used to it now, and I'm not a big humidity fan. So we, the analogy of business is Mark Ford's like, the next business you start should be only one step removed from the first. And if you let's say you run a gym, and then you move to an online fitness business, well, that's a wise move. The marketplace, you have assets, you have audience, it's going to be a pretty successful transition. But if you go from gym owner to like, oh, I'm going to start fast food, I'm going to buy into a fast food franchise. Aside from the physical location commonality, you have nothing, right? It doesn't make sense. You haven't ran a food business. You are in totally different industries. You're in opposing trends. And so that would be a dumb idea for you to have a gym and a fast food restaurant. But a gym and an online fitness business is very similar. So, Canada and Mexico, not that big of a difference, same time zone. It's closer for my mom to come to Cancun from Toronto than it is for her to go to Toronto to Vancouver. And she doesn't have to change time zones. It's a 3.5 hour flight 3.5 hour
Love it.
flight from Toronto, and Vancouver's 5.5.
It's excellent.
Yeah.
Something
And,
just there
a
you
lot of
said
people
about
come through here and it's super simple.
something you just said about the business models. And I think this bears, you're talking a lot about the things and the ways that you're managing risk in your life and your business. You're hanging out with people who've already done it. You are following a path that's already been cut as opposed to trying to reinvent the wheel. You're taking these, call them logistical shortcuts, right? And I think that's really wise. And the second part is that piece of Mark's advice about stick 1 degree apart. I always like the example of you own a steak restaurant. Do you start a fish restaurant or a steak distribution company? And everyone always goes, oh, you go to a steak distribution company because you know steak. But it's the wrong answer. You
Right.
know restaurants. And I think that's a really good piece here is a lot of people that you would have worked with in the past believe, oh, okay, like I have to do this specific business because that's what everyone else is doing, when it's actually potentially really far from who they are, what they know, their skills, their abilities, their connections. I
Yeah.
think that just should be underscored, right? All right,
Yeah.
let's shift gears a little bit on that one.
Sure.
And let's jump back to your history because there's this email that you wrote, 2 emails actually that you've written years ago, and I haven't taken my Evernote. And I think that they are two of the most important things that anyone can read. The first one was called Affiliate Moneyball. And I don't know if you remember writing this, it's probably 2010, 2011. And you basically took the idea of Moneyball from the movie
Mhm.
and applied it, some sabermetrics essentially, and applied that to affiliates. What's the EPC I get from this affiliate? What copy works? How do these dynamics work? And when you take that idea, that was really popular back in, say, 2010. That was a really effective way to drive sales. Now the world has changed, but the idea of driving things through numbers still counts. How do you balance that? Numbers on one side and personal relationship sides, sorry, personal relationships on the other side. How do you navigate that now?
It's mostly on the personal relationship side now. I know people that are still heavily in the affiliate mercenary market where the money counts. The people are just dealing entirely on, hey, will this make me more money than Joe's thing? If yes, then I'll
Mhm.
promote your thing. There's still a lot of people that do that. It's probably grown. I'm so far removed from that world, just because the online industry has gotten bigger. So that's probably a very healthy industry. For me personally, it just has become less about that because there's less concern for money. And it's more about, because one of the reasons I stopped the fitness industry is because it got to the point where if you wanted to really make money as an affiliate in the fitness industry, you had to promote some horrible, sleazy promises. And I did it
Yeah.
once and I got such poor feedback that, so many of my friends are like, what are you doing? And I was like, man, because this guy promised me like everything was awesome. And he was a former student of mine, which is why I believed him.
Mhm.
And so I didn't verify. And that was like the final straw. I was like, this is just stupid. I don't want to, next month I have to promote some guy saying you lose 3 pounds overnight, and the month after that, it's going to be 5 pounds overnight. And it's like, this is just going down the wrong direction. So I'll just stop all of it together and just go sell my own stuff and do what I like anyways. And so that's what stopped me from thinking about the number side of things. And it's like, I will, heavily recommend people that I like, even if there's no monetary side of things. And even when people give me like, I recommend some guy to Bedros, he gave me $5,000 for it. Cause Bedros's coaching is 100 grand. So I told one of my clients, say, have you go and coach with Bedros, in addition to me. And Bedros said, hey, I'll give you $5,000. I'm like, give it to the Shriners Hospital because his goal is to be the #1 donator to Shriners Hospital. So I'm like, just add this to your plan. Because I just know that, at the end of the day, the client needs Bedros. Therefore, I would make the recommendation regardless of how much money Bedros made or how much money I made from the transaction. It was what this person really needs is this. And that's
Yeah,
what I spend most of my time on now.
that's good. And it's both a recognition of how the industry has changed, but also you've changed, right? And I think this is a really nice transition. Is back, I don't know what year it was now, 2000 and something. You and I were stepping around the streets of Denver in the middle of winter, talking about your dating life. And things have changed a lot now. You talked in between where you are now with a partner and a kid, and back then about your goal of finding that partner. I went to those annual planning sessions, and I went to them when I was married. I went to them when I got divorced, or right after we split up, and then a year after that when I was, a year single. And one of the things that really stuck with me was this one guy in one of our groups, as everyone went around the room and introduced themselves, saying, "Man, this is crazy. Like entrepreneurs all seem to get divorced at a higher rate. Is it inevitable that your business will destroy your marriage?" But you now know a lot of business owners, some who've been married for a very long period of time, and you're investing very heavily in building this relationship oriented world for yourself. What are your thoughts on what people can take from this? What are the mistakes in terms of managing risk that they can avoid? And what are the practices that you see that seem to help or correlate with flourishing marriages or flourishing partnerships?
Yeah, it's a good question. And so if you actually look at the numbers, which I did when I saw this in your questions, it's like, well, the average divorce rate is like 40 to 50%, and entrepreneurs is 43 to 48%. So it seems to be a total myth.
Mhm.
One other thing said that wealthier people get divorced more often, and maybe it's because there's more money issues. So I think, and I think that, him saying that, and anybody hearing that who's an entrepreneur and their marriage is struggling, that just gives them like the social proof that instead of working really hard on their marriage, it's like, well, it's inevitable, it's down to be. So I don't want anybody listening to this say, oh, entrepreneurs do have higher divorce rates. If it's 1% higher, it doesn't mean like your marriage is a problem, because at the end of the day, everything is individual. Everything is individual. And I have, most of my friends who are entrepreneurs and have very, very strong marriages. Now, I know some entrepreneurs who are good friends of mine who are divorced. And at the end of the day, I don't think it was anything to do with them being an entrepreneur. It was more to do with their personal characteristics and their marriage and some of the decision making, which might be why they're entrepreneurs. I don't know. It's very complicated. So don't put a lot of stuff into that. What I see, because I do talk to a lot of people, I've got a little 3C formula that I thought of, so it's, first of all, the communication is so important. And if you look at most marriages that I know, so most of the friends who I know that have had marriages fall apart, there was a big failure of communication in some way, shape, or form. There were people who like hardly ever talked to one another. There were people who talked to each other on surface level. There were people who talked to each other on surface level and sort of deeply, but then they had secrets that were not communicated. And so all of those levels is communication. The next thing is consistency. It's, there's Valentine's Day, there's Christmas and birthdays. And if you only show up like as an amazing partner on those days, eventually it's going to wear the other person down, because there might be 7 holidays in a year, but there's 365 days. And, 358 of those days are a real bummer. Nobody's sticking around for a present.
Well.
Yeah. And then the final one is commitment, and the commitment is key. And, I've talked to a lot of people, and their weekly updates to me is like, oh man, it's a tough week. And I'm like, I know this sounds cheesy, but go and reread 5 love languages, figure out what the love language is, and commit to it. Actually do the homework. And it does help in many cases. Some of my other clients who have had successful turnarounds have used, one used a Catholic marriage counseling service. I forget, he recommended it to me, but he said, he's now married like 40 or 50 years, and 20 years ago they used it and it was huge. The Gottman counselors, the Gottman method, has been used by some of my clients who said that they've tried everything, and Gottman has been the absolute best therapy. It's gotten, a wife who just wouldn't talk about anything, who had, high anxiety, always negative. He said they've had some of their best weeks of marriage after some of the therapy sessions. So, but it's commitment. Like when, those marriage vows, like if you are just mouthing the words, they're not much. But if you actually like, man, look at what I'm promising to do, man, that is a commitment.
Big deal. It's a big deal.
Yeah. And so if you're like, well, I'm either just going to go and say these so that we can get some photos and have a honeymoon and whatever, or like, okay, all right, death do us part, sickness and health, I'm going to say these, and I'm going to say them with 100% commitment. Well, now you got a marriage that's probably going to do pretty well. So those are three important things. And it's just work, man. It is work. Is a marriage hard? Man, yeah, for sure. It's going to be really, really hard, especially if you're married for a long time, because every year there's going to be hardships. There's going to be sick kids. There's going to be tragedies. There's going to be celebrations. There's going to be more money and less money than you possibly thought, which each of them bring their own issues. And it's going to be hard. But I'll tell you what, it sounds a lot harder to be divorced and alone than it does to be working through a marriage that has its issues. So as they say on the internet these days, choose your hard. You want a hard marriage, you want to work hard in your marriage and hopefully have a great marriage, or do you want to have the hardness of being divorced and, sleeping alone? It's up to you.
Yeah.
They're both going to suck at some point. At some point,
Yeah,
and, they're both going to have their
that's
positives.
it. And I think this is a really good point, is that if you're not willing to do the work at all, you should leave someone. This sounds like really counterintuitive, but if you're going to let that other person do a lot of work, but you're not going to do it, that person can't win. You're just prolonging that person's suffering. And it always
That
makes
is,
me
that
think of
is
this line
correct.
from Cameron
Yeah.
Herold, talked about wanting to fire someone. And he met up with this mentor for coffee, and the mentor said to him, "Well, how long have you been thinking about firing this guy?" And Cameron said, "Oh, 6 months or something." And the guy said, "We've got to go fire him today. Like, we're not having any more breakfast. Go to the office, fire him today, because the guy's checked out, and that's why you want to fire him. But you haven't got the balls to fire him because you're trying to feel good about yourself. If you're not going to help him succeed, and this ain't going to be where he succeeds, don't prolong his misery. Be human. Be good to him." And it's counterintuitive to hear that, but we talk about in business making commitment. We talk about in relationships making commitment. You talked about your mom sticking by your dad, maybe a relationship she shouldn't have stuck with. And this stuff gets really, murky and narrative bias and all this stuff. But as you said, it's an individual thing. And if you're
The
honest with
firing of a person is
men,
another unknown.
yeah,
It's the devil
yeah,
versus the devil you don't know. And it's like, well, I know what it's like for the person to come to work and kind of do a half-baked job. I don't know what it's going to be like when I fire the person, and I don't know what the response is going to be, and I don't know what it's going to be like to not have anybody even doing a half-baked job. So
yeah,
therefore, people are too scared to, that's a change that they're too scared to make because they don't know what it's going to be like. But, once you
yeah.
have to fire a few people, you get used to it and you realize, I mean, I tell this to everybody who's single and everybody who's an entrepreneur. When you fire someone or when you break up with a boyfriend or girlfriend, the next person's always going to be better. It's always going to be better. And
Yeah.
every single entrepreneur who finally gets rid of somebody gets a better person because they know what they're looking for. And most people hire wrong in the first place. They don't have, they hire somebody to do X and then they get ticked off later on when they're not doing Y. And I'm like, well, you didn't hire them for Y. You hired them for X. Like, why would you expect? It's like many gym owners who hire personal trainers and then get upset that they're not good at sales. Well, you didn't hire a salesperson. You hired a personal trainer. You hired somebody who
Yeah.
hates doing sales. Like that's almost every personal trainer. And now you're mad that
Yep.
they're not doing sales. Like that's on you. So, making sure that you hire in the first place and the expectations and all that sort of stuff. And so most people, when they have to fire somebody, all those things are missing. And so the next hire can only be better because there's expectations and communication and so on and so forth. So that's important there to understand and, rip the bandage off because, you're going to have to do it eventually. Just do it.
Yeah.
Like jump in the ice bath.
It's going to work out. And I think that's something it's easy for us to all forget, is that, yeah, you see online, someone's crushing it, someone's killing it. The first thing is, are they telling the truth? Right? Like I've seen behind the scenes of some of these businesses where people claim certain things. It's not always what it appears to be. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, it doesn't matter what that person's doing. It matters what you're doing. And are you getting better? Are you moving to a better position? Are you growing? Are things working out? And the truth is, even after rough periods, and I'll stand here and tell testament to you, it gets better. I don't think you know anyone whose life ultimately ended up worse than ended. It got better after the hard thing.
Yeah.
And, we've watched friends of ours get divorced a couple of times. We've watched friends of ours have business failures and business successes. Everyone's still kicking, man. Like no one, you and I don't sit there and go, "Ooh, can't talk to that guy today." He, remember that time 7 years ago, he had a business failure. That guy's written off forever. Ah,
Yeah.
man, like they're in the ring. All right, let's sort of bring this to a nice little close for everyone. Right? Is I want to do two things. I want to talk about just some client results in the past, and then I want to talk about some key pieces of advice. Let's start with client results. Of all the results you've gotten for people, I just want you to give me three that you are most proud of. What are three different results you've gotten for clients that you are, or you've helped clients achieve that you're really proud of?
Okay, so I'm really proud of Frank Den Blanken, who is just an absolute beast. And there's people like Frank Den Blanken and our mutual friend Carrie Wilkerson, and there's a couple other people who, when you meet, you see them successful, like how could they have not been successful? But there was a time our friend Carrie Wilkerson was, and I didn't coach her ever, so I'm not taking any claim for her results. But she was very overweight. She was like a broke school teacher. And then when I met her, she was this force of nature, very successful, amazing speaker. And I can't possibly believe that you were at one point struggling in any area of life. So Frank Den Blanken is like that because, when he came to me, he's working a ton of hours, and we just, organized them and got him his prioritization in place, and the guy's results just took off. So it was that on the numbers side is pretty amazing. I would say Vince, that we talked about before, getting him to say no was very important, because Vince to me is a family man mentor, because he's way further ahead. His kids are much older. He's got 3 kids. He's got a great marriage. He's very down to earth, really good guy. He's came to my first business event in 2007. So he's been getting coaching on and off from me for a long, long time. And I could see what the having too many things was doing to him. And he's always like, man, that guy's doing this, I should try that. And I'm like, no, man, just, be comfortable in your own skin. And he looks more comfortable in his own skin now, doing, really focused and successful. Like he's just in his greatness right now. And that's really, really fantastic. What is another one? There's just been a few people that stand in my mind where not only did the business get better, but the marriage got better, or that they found somebody like Xander Fryer. Let's just choose Xander and give a name to it. So, Xander came to me, he had just had his first 6-figure month, and, I helped him with some business stuff, but, he made this huge promise that he wanted to find like this amazing woman. And I just watched him update me every week. And he was always running around the country, oh man, my buddy over here, he had a huge breakup, I'm going to go and console him. Or I was the best man at the wedding this week. This week we're taking a friend on a vacation. And it's like, dude, like you update me every week and you're doing such nice things for people, but you haven't made like one step of progress towards like this huge claim that you made at your workshop with me. You said you wanted to find an amazing woman, and all you do is hang around buddies. So what are you going to do? And so we gave him the path, and we said, get accountability, tell people. I'm a big believer, like you tell people what you want to accomplish. And there's a lot of good people out there who will make it their job to like make sure that and they'll just voluntarily make it their job to make your life and dreams come true. Because I noticed this when I launched my turbulence training certification. I said, I want to start the turbulence training certification back in like 2011 or 12. And I want to help 1 million people transform their lives. And I just got all these people messaging me saying, how can I be involved in this? And I was like, that's really interesting. When you make this big proclamation and, the classic, make something, give something people a chance to be part of something that's bigger than themselves, people will really get on the bandwagon. And it's the same with when you tell good people. You can tell bad people, the wrong people, about your goals, and they can try and pull you down, right? The tall poppy syndrome, whatever you want to call it, crabs in the bucket, et cetera. So you have to choose properly who you tell these goals to. But when you choose the right people and you tell them about your specific goal, It's like the classic story that many marketers have heard. When you buy a white Corvette, all you see on the roads are your white Corvettes because of your reticular activating system. And so the reason why I bring that up is that when Xander Fryer tells me that he wants to meet a great girl, my reticular activating system is always on the lookout for great girls to introduce to Xander Fryer. Like that's what good people do when it's like, hey, I need help with something. Oh, okay. I'll just keep that on my radar, as the cliche goes. So anyways, it ended up that Xander met the girl under his timeline. He's married. They moved to Costa Rica. They're happily married. They're great. Everything's good. Everything's good. And so it's pretty neat to see that because that's my experience. You share with the world what you want to accomplish. You have a specific vision, and it can come true down to the very fine details. When you know what you want, you go after it. And so that's like, he shouldn't have quit on that. Like, that's a thing where we talked about earlier, like there's a lot of things you should quit at, and you should quit at, like if he was trying to be like a world-class rock climber at the same time, just randomly picking an activity, like quit on the rock climbing because that's not important. This other thing's important, and never quit on it. And that's what you have to do.
It's definitely a filter for people, right? Of there are things which are sexy to say, and then there are things you want to do. And those are two different things. And when you ask for people's help with what you want to do, like Maddie's unreal. Maddie's great. Love Matt. I mean, it helps that she's Australian. I've always had a soft spot versus, Americans and Canadians, because you guys are like, okay. But it helps. And he did really well. And it's great to see him together.
Yeah,
all right,
absolutely.
Let's wrap this up with some timely advice, right? Let's say we're going to do 3 of these. Let's say that you're late teens, 18, 19 through to mid 20s. You're at the start of really your business money-making career. What is the one piece of advice that Uncle Craig would best be giving you?
It's a tie. It's either, because I've answered this question many times, and the two things that I would absolutely force upon myself is stop drinking, just stop. Learn how to be a human being without drinking. And that would just give you so much time. So if you did nothing else but stop drinking at that age, you would have an extra 15 to 20 hours of energetic focused time. So that would be huge. But the other thing is actually, and both of these are like I never would have done. So it's like, what good is this exercise? And the second thing is get a face-to-face, nose-to-nose, toes-to-toe sales job. Sell something either door to door or just simply, on a commission based where like you don't get paid unless you sell. That's what you got to do, because that would strike the fear of God into me, and I wouldn't have done it. It would have drove me to drinking, which, so maybe it wouldn't have worked. Neither one of these would have worked. But man,
you have to do the first one and the second one. I did it face to face.
If I could force it,
19, it's great.
Yeah. I mean, if I could force it on other people, that's what I would force those two conditions on people. Because I think that would make
35.
35. Fortunately, I'd stopped drinking. I would say just asking for help earlier. Now, it's kind of a catch-22, because if I had asked for help earlier on the wife's side, I wouldn't be where I am now, and I want to be where I am now. So that's kind of a catch-22. But just asking for more help in general. And so kind of what I said earlier, like now I'm embracing being the idiot. If I had just embraced being the idiot when I was 35 and started jujitsu, just imagine where I would be right now. So that's a great exercise for people that are thinking, man, I should start something. Well, think about in 5 years from now, if you don't start something today, you're going to be very upset with yourself that you didn't, because you're like, man, if I just started that in 2023, instead of 2025, and now it's 2028, I'd have another year and a half under my belt. Do it.
Yeah. 45.
45. I would say, I don't know. I don't even know how old I am right now. So I think that's a couple of years ago. What have I screwed up? It's the same thing. It's like, I wish I would have started jujitsu at 45. So it's the same sort of thing. It's like, whenever you know something matters, you got to go and get started on it. There's, the last couple of years, it's not that I haven't made mistakes. It's that the mistakes I've made have been the right ones. So I don't know. I really don't.
Okay. Last one. 55. What
So
advice would you give to a 55-year-old who's listening?
Oh, so for the 45, was I giving advice to myself, or was I giving advice to a 45-year-old person that was listening?
Ah, both.
Well, I
They're
mean,
same, right?
it's always going to be the thing that you should start. You got to start it now and stop waiting, hesitating, and procrastinating. Like, you got to do it, because you're just going to regret it. And the cool thing is, at 45, like, you are still a young buck, right? You still have 45 years left. So, okay, maybe don't look at like your life is half gone. It's like, there's half my life is left. I got a lot that I can accomplish here. You treat your mind and body right, you can create great stuff. So don't. And back in the fitness days, Rob, I would get emails from guys who were 28 saying, will I ever be able to get back in shape? And I was like, man, if I could just reach through the internet and slap you, like, don't be such a weirdo and think that way. So at 55, like, the game is not over. The game is not over in any aspect. It is not over in love. If you're 10 years divorced, it is not over in significance. If you feel like you haven't accomplished anything, like, there's plenty of people who accomplished a lot after the age of 55. Like, you pull out the old Colonel Sanders, he didn't start that till he was like 65 or whatever. And there's people that have written books and done stuff and become actors after the age of 65. And I don't know what age Susan Boyle was when she got found out, she was older. And so, never too old, never too late. Get started, do your thing. And, you probably have to work a little bit harder on your energy levels and stuff like that. But man, you can be a high energy person at 55. So just, stop making excuses.
So if I was to encapsulate this, there's two people who I think really embody the messages that you're giving everyone here. So it kind of comes down to, like, waiting is painful, getting started is great. And the first one is this girl who I saw the other day, 14 years old. And I don't know if you know the band Dragon Force, but she was playing this guitar solo, and it was incredible. I mean, this is a 14-year-old girl mastering an incredibly difficult guitar solo. And someone had spoken to her and said, hey, how did you get to do this? I mean, you're just 14. How did you do it? And she said, oh, I just don't waste time. It's so easy to waste time. And this girl is like, I've mastered one of the most difficult licks, most difficult guitar solos by not wasting time. On the flip side is Christopher Lee. So, famous actor.
Oh, he was Dracula.
He was Dracula. He was in a metal band. He was in a metal band. Yeah. So, I mean, towards the end of his life, he was in a metal band. So he was, and the friend of mine who is related to him will probably murder me if she hears this and I get it wrong, but I do know that he was in World War II. I want to say it was like special operations. So he was a soldier. He was an actor. He was then a heavy metal vocalist. And on top of that, he was a great family man. Like, he managed to do a lot of things, and he did many of these things that we best know Christopher Lee for when he was older. So I just think those two are such great examples of at different ages. Getting started is the thing that counts. So if anyone's listening to this, we didn't talk about all the, we've had many years of experience. We didn't cover everything, but the one thing that's very clear after asking these questions is, one, you made a lot of mistakes yourself and you've learned from them. And you've learned how to minimize the damage of those mistakes, as well as pass that on to your clients. But then it's actually about helping people move from, as you say, movement beats meditation, right? Getting them to make that jump, because you see with the clients that you do work with, they need that nudge. And when they get that nudge, they go from, Vince doing 1.5, jump on the 10 mil. Get rid of the things that don't work, focus on the things that do. When you're talking about the clients who their personal life is maybe in disarray, whether it's a marriage or a relationship, that's something that stops them from being able to have a flourishing life, having a flourishing business, because it takes up so much energy. And you nudge them to go get Gottman counseling. This is the thing. Yeah, and for me, we've exchanged a lot of emails over the years, but it definitely has been that case where you have just given people a nudge to say, go do it, follow up, ask the question, bet on yourself, whatever it might be. So I hope anyone who's listening to this understands that there is a man behind the man, which is you, obviously, and that you're not just some guy who, as is popular today, had one success and then started an internet YouTube channel and started telling everybody, hey, I had this one success, now I'm a genius. As Keith Cunningham loves to say, the problem with success is that it makes dumb people think they are smart. And I love that. You have a vast array of experiences and exposure to experiences that I think a lot of other coaches don't have. So it's just hopeful that I'm just hopeful that people who are listening to this actually really grasp that today, that there's a lot to you. And if they're lucky enough, if they're willing to look stupid for just a minute, Craig, you promise here publicly that you won't make fun of them if they.
I won't
they
even
do
let
something
them look
silly?
stupid. I won't even let them look stupid for a minute.
There you go. Awesome, man. Well, dude, thank you for
Yeah.
letting me ask these questions. I know we didn't get through all of them, but I think there's some really cool ones. I learned some stuff that was new. I didn't know you wanted to stake in sovereign research back in the day. So I
Yeah.
learned something new after all this time. How
Yeah.
good is that?
That is fun. What else what were like
Cool.
one or two other things that you didn't know?
Ooh, one or two things that I didn't know. I mean, that's the one that really stood out to me.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
think the
what,
others
what,
I'm pretty well across.
yeah. And
I was
then
pretty well across it.
what about, just to give a hint to people in case we do this again, what were some of the things you didn't get a chance to ask me about?
Ooh, I think the one that I would have liked to ask, and maybe we should leave this one for a future one, was actually about your childhood and your background, which was, you've talked about your dad being a hard worker and a hard drinker. And that obviously has an effect on you both on a professional sense as well as a family sense. And you touched on this with your mum's relationship with your dad, and just understanding how you feel that affected your approach to business and family. That's probably the one question, if we had have asked earlier, we could do it now, but maybe we could leave it for
No,
another episode.
we'll unpack it in a future one.
Yeah, let's do that. All
Yeah.
right, man. That was great. Well, thank you for being willing to be open and vulnerable. Look at that growth.
Well, that was pretty easy, actually. So,
Okay, I'll ask other questions next time.
no,
I'll
that
really
was
dig
great.
into it.
Thank you, Rob.
Perfect,
I really
man.
appreciate
Yeah,
it, man.
thank you.
And thanks everybody for listening. And let us know what questions you want Rob to ask next time we do one of these. Just drop it in the comments below or email me at Craig@CraigValentine.com or hit me up on Instagram at Real Craig Valentine. Say, hey, answer this on your podcast. Appreciate it.